lose any of these valuable nuggets.
So anyway, now we are recording for the Brightspace gradebook overview session. Again, I see the gradebook as just another way that we can provide feedback to students, feedback in context. And so I'm going to go over a couple of basic use cases. More of you were interested in how to set up categories with weighted grades, which is a fairly common approach that we see when we're working with faculty. I will work through a kind of very simplified example of just a straight points-based grade book, which works quite well as well. So we'll look to see um, what are some of the settings that you're going to want to think about when you're setting up your grade book, how to go into the Manage Grades tab to actually set up your grade book to match the schema that you're using in your course, and then what options you have for entering grades for those items that are manually graded in the grade book. So for example, if you're giving a midterm in your course, and you have scored that midterm, you have to get those scores manually into your grade books in some way because you're not doing that as a quiz in Brightspace. And then we'll look just briefly at um, scoring submissions or activities, assignment submissions or other activities in Brightspace, and how to associate Brightspace activities with items in the gradebook. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let's actually make sure that I am on the page that I want to share. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me minimize that window and move this window out of the way. Teams is just as obnoxious as Zoom in terms of having all of these windows in the way. So, to use the gradebook in Brightspace, the first thing you want to do is to go into the grades area of Brightspace and set some basic settings, and then go into your Manage Grades option to set up your schema to match your course. So under Course Management, there's an option here to go look at the grades area. Now there is a setup wizard that will step you through and ask you what you want to do for various settings on the gradebook. And first time you're in your course, you might be directed there. I'm not gonna direct everyone to the setup wizard. If the stuff that we will talk about um, is all under settings here. If later when you're working on your course you want to have someone step you through the settings that we're going to talk about, that's basically what the setup wizard would do. In your grading area, you've got this enter grades area, which basically is empty at this point. All this is showing is the final calculated grade and any grade adjustments that I might want to put in for my 3 sample students that I've got enrolled in this course. If you look under Manage Grades, this is the page that it basically displays your grading schema. And again, you can see here, this is an empty grade book. There aren't any grade items, there aren't any grade categories, and so forth. Before you start building, by adding either items or categories or taking other actions here under Manage Grades, you really want to go into Settings first. And under Settings, there are a couple of display option pages, which are not so important. The one, I mean, you can change some of these if you really want to. Uh, you can specify that you want to see usernames show up in the gradebook. I had no need for that. The one thing a couple of things that you might want to determine. By default, you'll see the final grade shown when you're looking in the grade book under the um, Intergrades tab. Uh, by default, the calculated final grade will show up at the beginning and at the end, and that's kind of a useful thing. If you are using adjusted grades, that is, you want Brightspace to calculate the final grades, but then you want the ability to say, well, I'm going to bump this student up a few percentage points and maybe bump this student down a few percentage points. There is an adjusted grade, final grade column as well, and you can also have that show up at the beginning and at the end of the listing of grade items. One useful thing is telling Brightspace, when I go into the grades area, what I want to see first. The default is the enter grades page. I generally tend to move that to manage grades because I am working in the manage grades page more often than I'm working on the enter grades page. And so I would set that to manage grades and save that. Um, Under the org unit display options, I'm not sure that there's any of these defaults you need to really adjust, but you can look at any one of these question marks. They are more or less useful depending on the item. Um, if you really want to display your grades to students out to 5 decimal points, you can do that. But I don't find that there's really anything I need to change here under the org unit display options. Calculation options is important. This is where you would make this fundamental distinction between, do I want a graded weighting scheme? So for example, here are the two schemas that I'm thinking about modeling today. A point schema where I've got two 100-point midterms in class, a 150-point final, 10-point assignments, and a 50-point term paper. And if I've done the math correctly, that all adds up to 500 points. Okay? And that is the kind of approach that when I'm working with faculty, a number of faculty say, I just want to have relative points for the different items that I'm having my students do, and it all adds up, and students know that they're adding up to a certain total points of 500 or 1,000 or 100, whatever. The weighting schema is probably more common when I'm working with faculty. That is, in your syllabus, you said, okay, we're going to have exams, and the exams are worth 35% of the grade, and we're going to have a final paper, and that's worth 25% of the grade. They're going to be periodic quizzes throughout the semester, and altogether, those are going to be worth 20% of the grade, and I'm going to be doing some low stakes assignments in class, and that's going to be 10%, and I'm going to keep 10% for discussion. That would be handled under this weighted schema. And so here in the calculation options is where you would make that fundamental choice between weighted or points. Weighted is actually the default in Brightspace, which is good because that's the more common approach among our faculty. I'm going to look at the points example first, so I'm going to switch this to points. You can get more complicated. We're not going to get more complicated today, but you can have a whole variety of grade items in your grade book, and then you create some formula um, combining those grade items into a final grade. Couple of um, important options here. Um, or actually one really important option here. How are you going to treat items in your grade book that don't have any grades? The default is for ungraded items to be dropped. So for example, let's say that I do have, the two midterms and the final in there, and I've got the 10 quizzes, and I've got the term paper, and we're 3 weeks into the course, and students have completed two of those assignments. So they've completed two 10-point assignments, and on each assignment, each student has gotten a score between 0 and 10 points. If you treat ungraded items as 0, students are going to have, at that point in the course, a strikingly low percentage. I mean, because they've only completed 20 points out of the 500 total points in the course. I have worked with faculty who say, I want students to start out the semester with a 0. And as they complete things, they build up their score, and they're building up to the 500 total points. If you want everything, even things that you haven't asked students to do yet, or haven't graded, um, to start off as zeros until they actually do something, 3 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks down through the course, you would treat ungraded items as 0. The default is to drop items that don't have a grade in them from the grade calculation. So with that default, if a student, say, got 8 out of 10 on the first 10-point assignment and 9 out of 10 on the second assignment, they would be seeing an 85% as their calculated final grade at that point. Because all the other things that haven't been done that are empty would not count as zeros. This this default of dropping ungraded items kind of gives students, how am I doing so far in the course? As opposed to, I'm starting off at 0. How am I increasing my point total toward the end of the semester? I've always done this because I want students to say, based on the work that you've done so far, um, you know, how is the course going? Now, you have to remember that if you do go with this default, any student who doesn't do that first assignment, you need to actually put in a 0 and not just leave it blank. Because if you leave it blank, students are that lack of submission on that first assignment is not going to show up. So that's an important distinction that you want to determine, and this fundamental distinction between weighted and points are really the main things you want to make sure that you match up to how you want to handle the course when you come into grade settings and calculation options. So I'll save that. And when you're changing from weighted to points and back and forth, Brightspace really wants you to confirm that multiple times before you do that. So again, if you go to manage grades here, or actually, I think that shows up anywhere, no matter what. no matter what page you're on here, you have this access to settings. So click on settings, again, under calculation options, weighted versus final, weighted versus points. Okay, so I know a few of you were interested in basically how a points-based grade book would work. I'm going to just look at that by adding some manual items corresponding to that grading schema. So I could add an item here, and when you're adding items, there are lots of different types of items you can add to your grade book. Most of which is going to complicate your life and make it more complex to coming up with a final calculated grade. By and large, most of what you want in your grade book is if you want Brightspace to kind of be able to easily calculate a final percentage that your students can understand, you're going to want to be focused on numeric here. But there are some different options. You can add an item that is restricted to pass fail, but you can do that in terms of numeric by having an item that is just a 1 point item that is either a 0 or a 1. Again, formulas and calculated text, you might want to have a placeholder in your grade book where you can just pop in some text. So that might be useful. But I'm going to add a numeric item here, and I'm going to call it midterm 1. And I'm going to make it 100 points. Now, when you're adding grade items, there are these 3 things that you can turn on. One is, are you going to allow students to get more than 100 points on the midterm? If that's the case, you can click can exceed. And in that case, if someone actually got, by whatever means, on your midterm, 105 points out of 100, you can actually enter something that's more than 100. This is a little bit dangerous because by not selecting that, Brightspace knows to tell you that anything outside of 0 to 100 is bad data. If you click here, can exceed, there's nothing to stopping you from putting in 10,000 if you hit the 0 key a little bit too hard, which is obviously going to really screw up your grade calculation. But anyway, you can do that. Bonus, if you specify something as a bonus, students can accumulate points from that item, but it doesn't it doesn't add to the denominator of the grade calculation. So this is basically extra credit. Excluding is different. Exclude means that the point value that the student got and the possible point value of the item doesn't figure into the grade. And so this will be a way of putting in some item in the grade book that you want to give students some numerical feedback on, but you don't want it affecting the grade at all. You don't want it to be treated as extra credit. You don't want it to be adding to the total points and so forth. So that would be where you'd use that. So I'm going to just say save and close. And if we do that, we now see that we've got a grade item here for the midterm that's 100 points, and the maximum points in the course is 100. I'm just going to quickly do some more here. I'm going to put in the other midterm. And again, I'm going to make it 100 points. And click save and close. And another one here for the final. And I'm going to make that 150 points. And you can see we're building up We're building up grade items, and because this is points based, Brightspace is just saying, okay, well, we've got 350 points so far, and I'm not going to put in 10-point assignments. Well, let me just put in the final paper, and we're going to make that 50 points, and save and close. And in terms of those 10-point assignments, you could create a category here for those assignments and make that 100 points. And then within the category, um, add the 10 assignments. I want to save that for when we're talking about the weighted grading schema. So here we basically have 400 points total, and students can earn anywhere from 0 to 400 points on the course. If you look under edit grades here, you basically will see um, a standard view of the grade book where you've got your roster of students and you've got your items here, and each of the students each of these is a place where you can enter a grade for a student. Now, you've got a couple of ways of doing that, and this may be jumping the gun a little bit of what I'm going to talk about later, but you can switch at this point to spreadsheet view. And if you do that, I mean, you just have ability places where you can manually enter grades. Now, if these were not, these are all, in my mind, items that are taking place in the course. So there's not there's not an assignment or a quiz in Brightspace that you're grading to put in these scores. If there were, you'd want to grade the actual activity and have the activity pump the scores into the grade book. But this would be one way of entering grades. If I switch back to standard view, either from this item in the standard view, I could say enter grades, or from the manage grades screen, I could go and select enter grades. And what this will give me is a screen dedicated to that one grade item where I could um, enter the grades. I find this useful, especially with my grade books, because I've got so many grade items. Looking at the grade book in spreadsheet view, I'm scrolling back and forth trying to figure out what columns I'm putting grades in. This ability to enter grades specifically for one grade item at a time is quite useful. And we'll come back to this page. Well, maybe we'll talk about it now. No, we'll come back to this page because there are various bulk items here that are useful as well.
Keith, just a couple items in the chat.
Sure.
Jenny asks, if I make an item 10 points and they get 10 out of 10, and it's the only item so far, does their final grade show as 100, assuming that the weighted grading schema is applied?
The final grade, the calculated final grade at that point would show up as 100%, assuming you leave the default where empty grades are ignored. That's why it's very important. If you had a lot of grade items in your grade book, and the only thing you had scored was that first assignment out of 10 points, and you had switched it to treat ungraded items as zeros, then no, it would not show up as 100%.
No, but that makes perfect sense what you said. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. That's like great, awesome.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
And
Yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
the default is great for giving students a snapshot in time. Here's what we've done in the course so far. Here's how you're doing so far. That's why I think it makes sense as a default. But as I said, some faculty do want students to basically start out at 0 at the beginning and build their way up.
Maria asks about bonus items and where they show up. so that they can be evaluated as additional points at the end of the semester.
So if you tag an item as, let me go back here, let me cancel out of here and go back into manage grades. And let me add a new item here that is numeric. And I'm going to say extra credit. I'm not going to guess what this activity is to make it extra credit. It's going to be 10 points and it's going to be bonus. And if I click save and close, it shows up as, an item in your schema. It has this little star next to it. If you see that students can get up to 10 points on this item, but you see the 400 total points has not changed. So this 10 points is not adding to the total points. So this, students can get 0 out of 400 points on these, regular items, and they can get up to 10 points more, but that 10 points doesn't increase the denominator essentially.
Keith,
So
funny thing, your head is blocking that final, that last number at the bottom. If you could just scroll, yeah, there you go.
okay, yeah, and I can't, yeah, oh well. So I'm going to select this extra credit item. Actually, I'm going to select all these items because I'm going to switch over now to a weighted schema. And I'm going to show you a quirk here about deleting items from your gradebook. So I've selected these items. There is, under more actions up here, a delete option. You would think that, okay, well, I select these and I click delete, that should remove them from the gradebook. What you get is this, and then you have to actually select the items that you want to delete and then delete them. And so let me cancel. If I had selected this extra credit thing to delete and I go to delete, I see all of the items here, but don't think, even if I select all of them at this point, I think it's only going to delete the extra credit one because that's the one I told it to delete, but we'll see. No, it's going to delete all 5 of them. So when I first started working on the grade book and was deleting, thinking, what's going on here? Why am I being asked to do this twice? But I guess I want to really make sure that you're sure that you want to delete those items. So I'm going to now go into settings, calculation items, and switch it over to weighted and click save. And now when I close this, I go to the manage grades screen because I told Brightspace that's where I want to go by default. You can see it's got the final calculated grade and final adjusted grade, but it has this note here. Final calculated grade sums to 0%, not 100%. So when you do use the weighted approach, Brightspace is a little bit more persnickety about things adding up to 100%. With the points, I could just add items and the Brightspace would total up, 350, 400, 500 points. But with the weighted schema, Brightspace is expecting your categories to add up to 100%. So I can go add a new category. And the one category I had was exams, are going to be worth 35% of the grade. Now, when you are adding a category, you have to decide a category by default is going to have one or more items inside that category. Now, and those items in the category may have different point values. How do you want them to contribute to the category? You could say I know I'm going to have two exams worth 100 points and one exam worth 150, and I want those point values to determine the weights. I want the final exam to be worth more on that 35% of the grade than the two midterms. You could distribute the weight evenly across all items, or you could manually assign the weight to each item in the category. If you do that, Brightspace is going to be um, very naggy in terms of making sure that as you add items to that category, you tell it what weight that is in the category. Um, we had these options in Moodle for how to aggregate within a category. We had other options as well. Taking the highest score, taking the lowest score, taking other approaches. So there is some limitations on the Brightspace gradebook compared to how we could manage items within a category and aggregate them up in Moodle. I'm going to have this distribute weights by points across all items in the category, and you can drop. If you are looking at quizzes and you want to drop the two lowest quizzes, you would specify this here and so forth. I'm going to click Save and Close. And now I've got an exams category, weight of 35 points. Brightspace is still not satisfied. It's not adding up to 100. So let me add final paper and quizzes and these other things.
While you're doing that, Keith, Jenny has a hand up.
Yep. Jenny?
Yeah, I was just wondering, now I don't know the language because it's not on the page anymore, but the distributing the amount across, yeah, I need to read.
Yeah.
Here was the question. If I have a category that's worth 24% and there are 12 items, each of which is worth essentially 2%, does it make a difference which option I choose in terms of distributing it across or doing it by points? Like, what's the difference between points and distributing it across?
It
Weighting.
does. If you have a category and you have a certain number of items in there, and each item has the same point value, doesn't matter whether you distribute or use the
Perfect.
point values, right?
Okay. Okay. Just making sure I understand that
Yep.
that helps me a lot. Thank you.
Keith,
So
George has a question here about when you have an existing category established, how do you place a new grade item into that pre-existing category?
sure. We can look at that. And I'll specify that for a manually entered item. George, let me add just another. I won't bother building out the whole schema, but let me put in a category for quizzes. Actually, I'm going to call it assignments instead. I'm going to put in a category for these in-class assignments. Uh, no, actually, I'm going to put a category in for Brightspace assignments. I'm changing the grading schema on the fly. I'm going to make it 20 points. And I'm going to distribute weight evenly across items and click Save and Close. And I still haven't added up to 100% here, but um, let me add, say, the two midterms and show how they would show up under the exams category. So I'm going to add a grade item, and it's going to be numeric, and it's going to be midterm 1, and it's going to be worth 100 points. And I'm going to put it into the exams category. And I'm going to click Save and Close. And you can see midterm 1 shows up here under the exams category. If I add midterm 2 and I forget to put it into the exams category, first of all, the fact that the fact that Brightspace is asking me for a weight, where I've set up that midterms category to be take the weight from the maximum points, that should be an indication to me, oh, I have not selected the right category here. But I'm just going to go through anyway. Click Save and Close. And now we have this item showing up here that's 100 points and it's 10% of the grade. Well, that's not what I want. So I need to edit this item, go back in here and put it into the exams category, save and close, and you'll see it shows up here. And the final calculated grade is back to the 65 that I put in here for these categories. Um, One limitation on Brightspace compared to Moodle, you cannot have subcategories within a category. This summer, I wanted under the I had a category that's basically uh, content um, um, assessment. Basically, it had a whole variety of low stakes quizzes in the category. I offered my students to an optional final. This is more from my online course. I wasn't initially going to have a final exam, but I said, okay, I'm going to give you an optional final. If you do better on the final than you did in total on the quizzes, I'll give you the score for the final. But if you did better on the quizzes, then I will give you that score rather than, and the final won't count. Uh, so I wanted within my exams and quizzes category to have a category where I could park all of the quizzes and an item for the optional final, and then be able in that category to automatically pick whichever one was better. You, so I put in a question to the SUNY help desk. How do I do a subcategory within a category? And the answer came back, you can't. And so I was kind of out of luck. I had to basically just set up the final as an ungraded item, as an item that was not in the grade book. It was graded, but not in the grade book. And I had to manually compare how well students did on the final to how well they did on all the quizzes. Um, what else here? Okay, so these are adding items manually. Again, I could add the final to go into that category. These are all things that we're doing in class. And I'm going to park it into that exams category, and it's going to be 150 points. I click Save and Close. Now, I have in the earlier workshop created some assignments. And if I go into the assignments area and click Edit the Assignment, when I set these up in the earlier workshop, I did not attach them to the gradebook. And so, first of all, let me make that visible. I'm going to make this a 20-point assignment, and I'm going to add it to the gradebook. I'm going to create and link it to a new item in the gradebook, and I'm going to choose the grade category, and I'm going to put it into Brightspace assignments. And I would oftentimes forget this step, and so these things would just show up on in the main section of the gradebook, and then click OK. And now, if I save and close here, I see that this assignment is linked to a grade item in the grade book. And if I go into the grades area and under manage grades, I will now see this assignment showing up, and it shows that it's associated with an item in the assignments area. So it's a lot more, there's a lot more steps here in Brightspace than there was in Moodle. In Moodle, if I created an assignment, by default, it would go into the gradebook. And if I had grade categories set up, I could specify what category it would go into. And I had to actually choose ungraded to keep it Moodle assignment out of the gradebook. By default, if you don't do something when you're setting up assignments, they won't show up in the gradebook in Brightspace. You have to associate them with a grade item. So if we go back here again, let me go back into assignments and let me associate the other one. I'm going to again edit the assignment. And, when I set it up, it was ungraded. I'm going to make this a 10-point item. And I am going to create a new grade item. And this time I'm going to forget to choose the grade category, and I'm going to click OK and save. And if I go into grades and look under the manage grades item, you see, I didn't get this where it's supposed to be up in this category, and it's not. It's adding to the percentage total here. So again, I can just edit this item and put it into the Brightspace assignments category. Click save and close, and it's there. So we've already looked at how we can enter grades for an item that's not associated with a Brightspace activity. Just go in here and manually add. If I cancel, I could do the same thing for these assignments. I could say enter grades. And I could enter the grades in the assignment, but that really is defeating the purpose of having an assignment activity. If instead I go to assignments and I'm ready to grade, I can view submissions, and I will have my roster listed here, and I can go to the evaluation, and I will see that I'm looking at user 1 of 3. If there were an assignment submission, I would see it here. I could read through it. I could actually comment on it using the Brightspace commenting tools. And I could give it a grade, let's say 16, and 80%. And here's some feedback. And I can publish that score to the grade book. I can go on to the next student and I'll give that student a 10 and go on to the next student. I'm going to save that and give that student an 18 and publish that, and go back to submissions so that I can get my Brightspace menus, so that I can go to the grades here. And if I go into the enter grades view, where I can see kind of the standard view of the grade book, I can see that for this assignment, I didn't actually publish that student's score. You can see that this student's getting a 90%, so they've got this kind of blue highlight on their subtotal for this category. and this student had an 80%, so they've got this kind of green. Need to go back into the assignments and view submissions again, because I really should have published that student's score. I've got a draft saved, so I'll go to the evaluation and I will publish that. And go back to submissions so that I can get my menus, go back to grades. And now if I just go here to enter grades so I can look at that item by itself, you can see that all the grades that I've entered in on the assignment have been published, and any feedback that I would have entered on that assignment would have been published as well. Now, I think one last thing we have to look at, and then we've covered everything. Let me cancel out of here, and let's say I am exempting student 2 from having to do this chapter 12 assignment. They had some excused absence or whatever. I don't want chapter 12 assignment for them to count in any way toward their grade. I can go enter grades on that activity. And you can see you've got check marks here. You've got bulk items up here. So I could select student 2, sample student 2 for this item, and I could say exempt. And now this item is not going to figure into that student's score at all. It will show up as exempt here in the standard view of the gradebook. And yeah, so again, if you go to enter grades for any particular item, you can select one or more of your students, and you can exempt them from that item. You can unexempt them. You can clear the grades. Setting grades. Let's say you're 4 weeks into the course. Students should have submitted their first assignment, and you've graded them, and 4 of your students did not submit the assignment, so you want to give them the 0 so that it calculates into the grade. You can select, however many students didn't submit the assignment. You can click Set Grades, and you can give a grade of 0 out of 10 or whatever, and click Save. Rather than having to go in and put a 0 in this cell and a 0 in this cell and a 0 in this cell and a 0 in this cell, you can bulk select students that you need to get zeros on a particular grade item and set them this way. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think we've covered basic setups. Go into the settings. Do you want weighted grade categories, or do you want to just add up point values? Do you go into your manage grades page, set up your schema to match what you want in your course, and then there are multiple locations where you can manually enter grades for those things that are not taking place in Brightspace. If you've got assignments, quizzes, discussion forums in Brightspace, and you've associated them with items in Brightspace, you would grade them in those activities, and the scores would be published to the gradebook in Brightspace. Coming to the end of we're past our 45 minutes. Any questions that are still outstanding? Okay. So again, the SUNY Online Help Desk folks should be able to provide access or help in using the grade book. Certainly, they can provide you fairly immediate response in what was it, 7 a.m. to midnight, Marie, during the week?
Yep.
So, Marie and I, of course, are here. Gradebook questions are nothing that our campus tech services help desk is really going to help you with, but you can go to the help desk at SUNY Online. Um, Not quite night and day, but pretty much. And they've got a whole fleet of, uh, of help desk staff there to provide your assistance. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.
Can I ask very quickly,
Sure.
off topic? I have a conflict